Okay, so picture this. January 2026. All of a sudden, China's top military leaders, they're just gone, purged. Now, the world's first reaction was one thing, but what if we've all got it wrong? What if this wasn't a sign of chaos, but the final tick of a clock, counting down to war? Let's get into it. The immediate reaction around the globe was basically a collective sigh of relief. The thinking went something like this. Okay, there's chaos in the PLA. An army fighting itself isn't about to invade anyone. So, that massive threat over Taiwan, it seemed like it had just neutralized itself. But the source material we're looking at today paints a much, much darker picture. It suggests that we've got it completely backward, that this isn't weakness. It's the final, most thorough engine replacement before firing up the war machine. It's not a sign of problems, it's the last step in a plan that's already in motion. So to really get this, you have to look at who got the boot. We're not just talking about any old general. A guy like Zhang Youxia, he's a big deal. He's a decorated combat vet, a princeling with family ties to Xi Jinping that go back for generations. So when someone like him is removed, it tells you this isn't your standard anti-corruption sweep. This was about getting rid of a very specific kind of soldier with a very specific mindset. And what this all boils down to is a massive power struggle. It's basically old guard versus new blood. Two generations of military leaders who see the world and war in completely, and I mean completely, different ways. All right, so let's break that down. First up, you've got the old guard. Think of them as the breaks. These are the guys who actually fought in wars, like the one with Vietnam. They've seen what combat is really like, the chaos, the unpredictability. Plus, they're part of the elite. They're rich, they're powerful. The last thing they want is to risk all that. For them, it's all about stability. And on the other side, you've got the new blood. These guys are the accelerator. This is a younger generation of officers, born in the 70s and 80s. They grew up in an era of China's economic boom. They've never seen military defeat, only China's seemingly unstoppable rise. So for them, war isn't a terrifying risk. It's a golden opportunity. It's the fastest ticket to glory, to promotion, to their place in the history books. And this chart just lays it all out there, side by side. Look at this. The old guard, real combat experience. Their motivation, keep things stable. They saw themselves almost as partners in the regime. And their view on war, high risk, probably low reward. Now the new blood, zero combat experience. They're motivated by personal glory. They don't see themselves as partners. They're unquestioning subordinates. And war, to them, it's the ultimate opportunity. A total 180-degree difference in mindset. Okay, so here's the really crucial takeaway from all this. When you purge the old guard, you're not just getting rid of people. You're getting rid of the entire feedback mechanism. There's no one left in the room with the credibility, the seniority, the guts to stand up and say, hold on a second, sir, this is a terrible idea. Or, hey, our logistics for this plan are a disaster. All that's left is a giant echo chamber of yes, sir. Okay, so that's the internal picture. Now let's zoom out and look at the external factors, because this is where it gets really interesting. The analysis we're looking at argues that a potential second Trump presidency is seen in Beijing not as a problem, but as a historic, maybe even a once-in-a-generation window of opportunity. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? He's not the CCP's nemesis, he's a godsend from heaven. So while a lot of people in the West think Trump is the ultimate China hawk, this perspective suggests that, from Beijing's point of view, his entire approach to foreign policy is the perfect green light for their biggest ambitions. And you can really see why on this slide. The Biden approach was all about strengthening alliances, AUKUS, Japan, South Korea, to build this wall of containment around China. But the Trump approach, the whole America First doctrine, is seen as doing the opposite. It views allies as freeloaders, which starts to dismantle that very containment network Beijing fears. And nowhere is this shift more critical than with Taiwan. The source argues that under a Trump presidency, Taiwan gets fundamentally recategorized. It goes from being this sacred symbol of democracy that America has to defend to being just a business competitor that, in his own words, took our chip business. And once you make that mental shift, once Taiwan is no longer priceless, it raises a really dangerous question for strategists in Beijing. If it's just a commodity, well, everything has a price, right? So what would it take to get a transactional president to just look the other way? So what could that price be? The source speculates that a hypothetical deal from Beijing could start with something a businessman just can't refuse. How about $2 trillion? a massive purchase of U.S. Treasury bonds, basically helping to solve America's debt crisis overnight. But it wouldn't just be about money. The deal could also solve a really painful domestic problem for the U.S. Imagine Beijing promising a full, complete stop to the export of all fentanyl precursors. That's a huge political win right there. And then, the cherry on top, the final piece of this hypothetical deal. What if Beijing offered to just hand over the assets of TSMC, Taiwan's crown jewels semiconductor company, to the U.S., literally giving America back the chip business that was supposedly stolen? How do you say no to a deal like that? So let's put it all together now. We've got the internal military purge on one side and this perceived external opportunity on the other. When these two things converge, you get what the source calls a uniquely dangerous moment in history. And to really drive home how serious this is, the analysis points to a chilling historical echo: Imperial Japan in the 1930s. Back then, you had the exact same dynamic. The cautious, experienced military leaders were pushed aside by radical young officers who were champing at the bit for expansion. And we all know how that ended: Pearl Harbor. And what makes this all a tinderbox is the potential for massive miscalculations on both sides happening at the same time. On one hand, you have Beijing potentially thinking an invasion of Taiwan will be a quick, clean, special military operation. Sound familiar? And on the other hand, you have Washington potentially believing that you can trade away security for business deals and that isolationism will keep you safe. So on one side, you have this internal situation, a massive, ambitious army eager to prove itself, an army where the brakes have been completely ripped out. And that ambitious army is looking out at a world where the traditional global superpower seems tired, eager to go home, and is potentially led by someone who sees the world not in terms of alliances and duties, but in deals and dollar signs. So the bottom line from this analysis is pretty stark. The guardrails are gone. The things that have kept the peace for decades, the cautious generals, the strong alliances, the credible threat of U.S. intervention, all of them have been systematically dismantled or are at risk of being dismantled. And this quote really just sums up the entire argument, doesn't it? War often erupts in the gap between miscalculations, born from the embrace of ambition and apathy. It's not just one thing. It's the perfect storm created when a rising power's unchecked ambition crashes into a global power's perceived indifference. That gap, that's where the danger lies. Which leaves us with the one single, sobering question that this whole analysis builds towards. It reframes the entire debate. When a nation that has completely lost its fear of war meets a world that has seemingly lost its will to stop it, what happens next? It moves the question from if to when. And that's a terrifying thought to end on.